This episode of MMPQB is brought to you by Unleashed Music. Artists like Dar Williams, Michelle Malone, Arctic Monkeys have all trusted Unleashed to help get their music heard. When you're ready to take the next step in your creative career, you can find them at unleashedmusic.com. Welcome to More Music Please, Quarantine Beat. I'm your host, MK. Join me and my guest as we explore how the music industry is staying busy and keeping connected during lockdown, and also just talking about whatever. Let's get started. On the line with me today from Flint, Michigan, originally, Jono Diener. He is a comic writer. He is a musician with Swellers, Baggage. You can also hire him as a drummer in non-COVID times. Some really cool stuff going on right now with the Inevitable project on Kickstarter. And like me, a person with misophonia, which we were just talking a little bit off mic, that you are the first other misophonia sufferer I think I've ever spoken to in person. So I'm like unreasonably excited to talk to you.
It's quite an exciting ailment we have.
Yeah, well, it's a nightmare, and it's a nightmare that nobody else seems to understand. So I'm excited to dive deep on that. But first, just thanks for being on the podcast. And how's things going for you? How's quarantine life?
Well, first, thanks for having me and doing the podcast. It's very cool. So quarantine life for me is very strange because, to put it in perspective, a week after I graduated high school in 2006, I got in a van with my friends and I started touring. And I've been in a touring band for a very long time now. So essentially like 15 years. And being gone 10 months out of the year and then being gone like 6 months out of the year, and then not being able to play a single show in months is one of the weirdest things in the world. So
Yeah.
I've completely like reconfigured my brain to make sense of everything happening right now.
Yeah, what's that process been like? I mean, I've spoken to a couple of people so far, like Andy Frasco, for example, was kind enough to come on the show, and he was like, well, I just bought a house, so all of a sudden I have time to like be in my house and like decorate it. So are you enjoying any aspect of being off the road, or is it just kind of weird and bad? Oh.
Because I've been in a ton of projects. So, for example, with the band No Trigger, we did a lot of overseas stuff, and that was always just a vacation. With Baggage stuff, because it was essentially starting from scratch, it was jump in a van, book these DIY shows and do whatever I can. And then my other band, Braided Veins, which is like an even smaller band than Baggage, pardon me, that was more of like, we play weird underground punk shows and stuff like that. So, I have varying degrees of processing what's going on. But for me, this was a weird, and again, like it's never there is no positive, right? Like,
Yeah.
There can be a positive to staying home and, changing what you do. But again, to, say it out loud, what's happening is not a positive thing.
Yeah, of course.
And that's the most like awkward, sentiment that people have to go through, because it's always like there's a silver lining and blah blah blah, and I'm like, it's a really unfortunate silver lining, but to make sense of it and to, I guess, like have that glimpse of sanity, I guess that's a good way to put it. I started just trying to find hobbies and finally be okay with not doing stuff. So my job that was mostly full-time as a freelance writer, that started changing because a few of the places just kind of disappeared. And then I was like, okay, so now I don't have a job and I have too much time on my hands and I have all of this other stuff. I need to figure something out, or else I'm going to lose my mind. So one of my friends challenged me. He said, hey, you should do a drum video. Like, I'm challenging a few of my friends. So I just jokingly was like, whatever. I've never done one. I know people on YouTube do it all the time. So I set up a PA speaker on a folding chair, and then I put my mic and clipped it onto my phone and clipped it onto a microphone stand. And I did this really strange makeshift, like blaring music playing from my iPad while I was drumming to it, hoping that the level was right. And then that was my drum video. So I was like, that was fun. And then I kept doing that because I was like, I haven't played along to other music since I was like a kid, like doing it for fun, especially because that's how I really learned how to play drums properly. And then as time went on, I was like, I am really sick of how loud cymbals are and how loud all this other stuff is. And then finally, one of my friends hit me up and he was like, he plays in a band called Beartooth, and he's an amazing drummer. His name's Connor Dennis. And he said, stop listening to people that are telling you to get this ridiculous, expensive recording gear. You need to just invest in this stuff. It's super simple and it's super cheap. So I got an interface, the cheapest drum mic pack I can get, and then I just got Logic, which was a free recording software for 90 days. So I'm like, whatever, we'll give it a go. And then almost like within an hour, I figured it out. And I'm like, oh. So like my weird silver lining was I learned how to not only record myself for the first time, but make like professional quality drum videos and then actually offer to drum on people's music remotely.
Yeah. That's amazing. And yeah, it's not as hard as you think. Like I've kind of gone through a very similar experience where like, you know, I lost the radio job and I was very familiar with like the equipment that they had there, but I was like very daunted by the idea of like setting up a home studio for myself. And it turned out to be, yeah, like same thing. I bought an interface, wasn't even expensive, split it with my boyfriend, and managed to source like some used equipment from some friends, you know, bought a mic cheap and pop filter and everything I needed, and got Reaper, which is still free, which someday hopefully maybe I'll buy. But yeah, it's like really not that hard to make yourself sound pretty professional.
Yeah, and I feel like it's also, you know, you have a voice for radio. Like I play for drum recording. Like there's these certain things that we pick up over the years where we have to at least make our part sound good. So whatever gear we use, you know, that's a small percentage of what's actually going on.
Yeah, totally. Tell me about The Inevitables. I was looking into this a little bit. So it's a comic that you are a writer on, and it's going to be accompanied by a full album soundtrack, which is a great idea. Who else is involved, and what's the story, and is it coming out soon?
So that whole thing is so wild. So on Christmas, it was Christmas Day, 2019. I got a text from Vinny from Less Than Jake, and he was like, hey man, you have time to get on a phone call soon? And I was freaking out because I was like, why is Vinny texting me? And also it's Christmas, so this must be really important. So some backstory with that, my band, the Swellers, used to tour with Less Than Jake way back in the day. We've worked with Vinny in the past with this label Paper and Plastic, and he also left Less Than Jake a year prior to that moment. So all I could think of was, is he calling me to ask me to be the drummer at Less Than Jake? That's
Shit.
That's kind of weird, but okay. I was like, hell yeah, I'll do it. So I was really excited, got on the phone, and then he pitched me the idea. So his whole thing was, it's already called The Inevitables. They're already working on songs. Here's this loose theme, but he wants to expand it so it's a comic and an album, and kind of like create a world similar to what like the Gorillaz did.
Yeah.
So I was already like, yep. And the best part for me is like not in a bragging way by any means, but I often get hit up by people about playing in projects with them. So I also have a problem, and I always say yes. So for this, it's the first time I'm being asked to be as a comic writer on a project and not the person actually in the band.
Yeah.
So I got to focus 100% of my brain on that stuff, which is super cool. So as it progressed, it's a full-length album, and then it's actually going to be my first like full comic written by me. And I got to make my own little dream team. So it's Liana Kangas is like one of my best friends in comics. She's super rad and super supportive. She's doing the art for it. Fabian Lille is doing the layouts. So essentially, for those that don't know, laying out a comic is like half of the job of the art, because you can have really great illustrations, but if it doesn't make sense sequentially, or it just like kind of looks boring, it doesn't really do much. So Fabian crushed it on that. And then for lettering, we have Cardinal Ray. She is like, if I remember correctly, like an award-winning letterer that's done stuff for like Marvel, DC, all these other places. So I got to build this dream team. But on the music side, Vinny has it was Less Than Jake, Real Big Fish, the bassist of Jeff Rosenstock, Westbound Train, Nightmares for a Week, the Interrupters, like members from all of those bands, and made this like super group essentially like in a month or so. So I am doing part of that, but we launched the Kickstarter, and as of, while we're recording right now, obviously it comes out at a later date, but there's about 30 hours left of this campaign, and we've almost raised $40,000, which is absolutely bonkers.
Yeah, I scoped it out and I was like, oh, they've exceeded the donations already. So I guess that we don't need to plug it that hard, but like you can still get in there, right? Like even if it's already over the thing, like you can still donate.
I believe so.
Yeah.
I'm also very dumb, so I'm not sure.
Well, that's amazing. It's a great idea. I'm a big, I feel like I've said this on multiple episodes of this show, but I'm a big nerd for like a concept album. So anything where there's like a graphic novel or a comic that I can read and then there's music that goes with it, like that ticks all of my nerd boxes.
That's awesome. That's what we're going for too, because it's obviously very hard to pitch one thing or another, but if you're doing both, especially on Kickstarter, like you're bringing two different worlds together. So it's a lot of people that wouldn't normally buy vinyl, or a lot of people that wouldn't normally buy comics, and now they're getting exposed to both. And even if they don't want one or the other, like the project regardless will be getting the money. So it's super cool. And it's going to be out, I think like November-ish or something, or it'll be early next year at the very least. So it's already like in process, which is crazy.
Yeah, either way, those dates are approaching at a terrifying speed. So that's great. And again, that's called The Inevitables, and everybody should go check it out. So now that we've talked about what you're currently working on, I would love to backtrack to 2019, where an email landed in my work email inbox, which was a promo for your EP Life in Misophonia. And my head just about exploded because, as I said, like, this is, a weird brain disorder that I have that I only learned the name of maybe within the last 5 or 10 years, something like that. It's really not something that a lot of people know about, but I've been dealing with it since middle school. So I was listening to a little bit of your episode of Hard Times podcast, and you were a little bit older than me when you first kind of started to develop misophonia, right? So what's your misophonia story? Let's share.
Yeah, what a wonderful thing. So I'm trying to place exactly when I first started noticing it. I always thought that I just had a bad temper, that's what you kind of think, where you're like, I just don't like annoying stuff.
You just think you're crazy. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And one of my earliest memories was, I feel like my mom has a bit of it because, first of all, she's from Poland and she doesn't have tolerance, and she's super blunt about things. Mm-hmm. So I remember riding in the car with my friends, and she was driving us, and one of our friends would grab a water bottle and kind of squeeze it, and it would make that popping sound, and they would do it over and over again. And she turned back and screamed at him. She's like, "Stop it!" And we were like, "Whoa, relax, it's not that big of a deal." So I started later on, it's a combination of I already have pretty bad anxiety, which is not necessarily correlated with misophonia. But I was also drinking a ton of coffee, and that was when it started getting really exacerbated. So for me, I'd say probably in the last 6 years is when I really started feeling it. Usually it was around mostly my old band, where people were eating and I would always have music playing because we were always in the van, or I always had headphones on, or I was controlling the stereo. And I just felt like such a monster because the sounds of people eating was it wasn't making me grossed out. I was furious, to the point where I wanted to swat food out of their hands and hit them in the face. That's how bad it was getting. Yeah. And it's very hard to explain that to someone without just seeming like a piece of, I don't know if I could swear, but shit.
Yeah, absolutely you can. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. That kind of thing started happening. And I remember one day, we all got Taco Bell because that's, what you do on tour every single day. Mm-hmm. And I went to put on music, and they're like, "Dude, it's a nice day. Just leave the van off." I'm like, "Oh, well, I'll at least get it started so I could play music." And they're like, "No, dude, just let it go." And it was 3 just lip smacking, mowing down on burrito sounds and like crinkling a paper. And I was so freaked out, and I'm like, I'm just gonna play music on my phone if you guys are cool with it. And they're like, dude, what the hell? Like, chill out. And I'm like, are we bothering you or something? And again, when you don't know it's a thing, it's very hard to explain. So like fast forward to like certain sounds freaking me out. I remember one of our friends on tour like bit his nails, and that was the first time I actually like saw that in person. And it just like broke a part of my brain. And every time I see it, like I would have like a crazy heartbeat, and like I feel weird talking about it. But like that was one of those triggers that was also associated with a movement. And I don't know if you have any of those as well, but like the more research I did, the more I started like explaining and understanding this kind of stuff. So for me, like nail biting and lip smacking are like my two big ones. And a lot of it for me is things that I don't think are necessary. So whether it's like repetitive sounds or like rude, bad manners affiliated things, like that's kind of like the subgenre I have in my head. But it's to the point where if someone lifts their finger up to their mouth and I know they're going to chew it, I already get that same feeling. I don't even need to hear the sound anymore. I just already have that awful feeling.
100%. Yeah, I also have that. So my main trigger is gum, always has been. And I do definitely like, even if somebody is like sitting in front of me, like, because it started in middle school, and obviously a lot of that was being like stuck in classes with like kids around me chewing gum. And like, even if I couldn't hear this gum sound after a while, if I even noticed someone's jaw moving in that way, I would get the same reaction. And yeah, it's like, I think it is like an anxiety response. I've heard it described as like a fight or flight response, but it's elevated heart rate. It's extreme like anger. It's like this violent urge to like just either, I guess it is fight or flight, because I either want to punch them in the face and make them stop, or I want to run away and leave the room and get out of the situation. So yeah. And of course, like, it was really bad in middle school and high school because you can't escape. There's no escape. And it's the same thing being stuck in a van, I'm sure. Like, you can't just like exit the situation. You are trapped. And yeah. And I think there was a little bit of the psychology of like, that's not necessary. Like, why are you doing that? And like, lip smacking gets me too. There are certain ways that people enunciate certain things that like some of my teachers' voices would really bother me. Just like their hard plosives would really get to me. And I would be like, I sound like a crazy person, but like, I'll tell the full truth here. I used to sit in class sometimes, and like the classes of teachers that would bother me, with my fingers over my ears and just like try to like filter the sound through it. And I'm sure I looked fucking insane, but like that was how I had to survive. That was like how I had to get through these classes, because I couldn't, go to the principal and say, hey, can I transfer to a teacher with a less annoying voice? Like, that's not a thing that you can do. So, getting through school was a real struggle. And it's, it's better since then because I'm an adult now, and I'm not really ever like trapped in a situation. I pretty much always have the wherewithal to be like, hey, I'm going to leave the room now. But it still definitely comes up. I also prefer, if my partner and I are eating in the same room, which is usually the TV room, I prefer to have the TV on. And I think he understands why,
like,
but I don't
I don't mean to cut you off.
No,
but,
please.
Like, that is like my thing. Like, and what sucks is like my fiance, like I'm very open with her about everything. And like, and she knows it's not just her.
Yeah.
It's just, that's how it is for me, period. So, like our thing is like, we always like hang out, and we always have our TV trays, and we don't ever sit at the table, because if you sit at the table, that means silence.
Yeah.
But if you sit on like the couch or whatever with the TV tray, I could control the volume and go up just a little bit more, just so, because even my own chewing once in a while, like I'm conscious or self-conscious being like, I wonder if they think I'm being obnoxious.
Yeah.
And then no one in the world other than people like misophoniacs would think that. But yeah, that's a major one for me. I always have to have a soundtrack for things, which is essentially just blocking out the noise of human beings.
Yeah. Or like traveling, I will like airplanes, buses, anything like that. I always have earplugs, and I always have headphones. And, you know, like, 'cause it's my nightmare to be like stuck on an airplane in front of a gum chewer or like next to a gum chewer. And it happens all the time because people on airplanes are weak and think that they have to chew gum to keep their ears from popping, which I fucking hate. I wish I could just like dispel that myth. It's like, just, you know, swallow a few times, you'll get through it.
Also, and I need to jump in one more time.
Yeah.
The explanation you just had is how we react to seemingly normal things for everyone else. So like you have a justification of like, well, obviously it's this, and you add like this anger to it and all that stuff. And everyone else will go, just let me be, man.
I know.
You know, like, so it's like the way you react to that is the way I react to so many other things. And it's such a strange truth. Like there's a lot of shame in trying to like tell yourself like, no, what other people do is completely justified. I'm actually the weird one in this situation.
Oh, a ton of shame. Yeah, a ton of shame and guilt because you know that you're the weird one and it's not reasonable for you to like, you know, say to your mom like, hey, can you spit out your gum before I get in the car with you? Like, you know, or just like it's not reasonable. You're not making a reasonable request. And really up until like the last couple of years, I like didn't want to talk about it at all. Like just wanted to like pretend it wasn't a thing and just use my little coping mechanisms. But I finally, you know, the tipping point was actually I went to a Vampire Weekend show. Was it last year or 2 years ago now that the last album came out? I think it was 2 years ago, and I love them. They're one of my favorite bands, and they played in my town, and I was like so hyped, and I had the hookup through the radio station. I had great seats, and I took a few friends, and we got there, and we got to our seats, and my friend who was sitting next to me pulled out gum, and I was like, dude, I'm really sorry. I have this weird mental disorder. I will not be able to enjoy this show if you're chewing gum next to me. I know I'm obnoxious. I will buy you mints. And she was like, okay. She was like, I don't get it, but I respect it. And I was like, that's all I'm asking. So It's so freeing to finally just be like, you know what? I have a thing. It's got a name. It's called Misophonia. Fucking sucks. Wish I didn't have it, but I do. And if you can just accommodate me, and my partner's really good about that too. Like, and I do think it's a little contagious in that way where like he's now like, you know, he'll tell me he like noticed the way somebody was chewing something and it like got to him. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to make you notice that. But like, I kind of think like once you point it out, people start noticing it a little bit more, which like the mean side of me is like, oh, good. Like now they'll understand.
I have a lot of friends that do the same thing where like, I feel like you just pick up other people's things and like, it's not even them just trying to bond with you. Like they don't think about those things until last second. And then you go, I'm so sorry. Like you were pure until me.
Didn't mean to spread my curse to you.
So I personally found out about the name of it from a Facebook video. Where did you find out what it is and like how to, you know, finally have like a reasoning for that feeling? It was
an article online. I don't remember where I saw it, but like it might have just been like a Facebook scroll or, you know, a Reddit scroll or something where finally like I saw this thing that was like, hey, this is weird. Some people can't stand certain sounds. It's called misophonia. And I was like, oh my God, there's a word for it. Yeah, and that was maybe 5-ish years ago, like not that long ago. And I've been dealing with this, you know, since middle school and thought it might be, like you said, anxiety related, or I've had, you know, therapists suggest it was OCD related. Like nobody knew what the fuck to make of it. And so to finally have like a name was amazing and mind blowing.
Yeah. And we could touch on it in a little bit too, but like I was doing a lot of research because I was trying to find like charities to work in conjunction with the release of Life in Misophonia, the Baggage record. And I got on the phone with, it was the head of the Misophonia Association and the Misophonia Institute. Like I actually had like a big hour-long call and I had all these plans and I was like, I would love to get people, you know, like what is the number one thing you need? Do you need money? Do you need awareness? Do you need whatever? And then like after all of this stuff, it was kind of like, yeah, we could send you pamphlets. And I was like, well, cool. So like, what do you want to do though? You know? And they're like, oh, well, you could like include, well, actually we don't have pamphlets. I just thought about that. Maybe we could make some for you to send to people when they buy your record. And I was like, okay, I don't know if this is going to work. And like, I genuinely was like trying to like I usually align myself with like charities and organizations for different projects. So in the past, I did a music compilation during the Flint water crisis, which obviously is still going on, but it was called Not Safe to Drink, and we raised, I think it was like $9,000 or $10,000 from like an online compilation.
Nice.
And then I did this big charity comic for Flint for a different organization. And then with this, I was like, this is going to be my big, like, I actually suffer from this. Like, this will be a really important thing. And then I just had no answers and I had no idea what to do with it. But along the way, I was doing a ton of research, and like when it was getting really, really bad, like for me, it had to be a combination of like therapy, stress, reducing caffeine, like just overall wellness stuff. Like there's no fix, which sucks.
Yeah.
But a lot of people in a lot of forums I was reading, they're like, oh, there's this medication for OCD, and then there's this, and there's this. And then people would chime in and go, do not take that. You don't want to be, you know, a zombie if you're taking all these medications just for this thing. Just deal with it. Like, and, you know, that navigating a thing where there is no, like, quote unquote cure is super frustrating. So for me, my only way of dealing with it was like not completely avoiding the situations, but like at least being more vocal about it. And then that way, like, you know, there's some kind of compromise to where it's like, if I could drown it out, cool. If I can't, politely say something, but you can't like stop someone from the way they eat or exist, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
That just doesn't work.
Yeah, you know, you mentioned the forums. I have also been on the forums, and it's a depressing place. You know, I was on there's a subreddit for Misophonia, which I found out about a few years ago, and hung out on for a while, and just, it's a very angry place. It's a very frustrated place. And, you know, I tried to start a couple conversations that were like, what are some coping mechanisms that have worked? And what are some, you know, is there anything you've done like meditation or anything that's alleviated it? Let's talk about some, you know, some fixes that we've discovered, since science doesn't really have answers for us yet. And it was always just this circle jerk of like, there's nothing that can be done. We are in hell forever. I was like, okay, like this is not, you know, the energy that I need. I honestly even felt like, you know, when I was reading other people's like rants about how terrible their day was because of their misophonia, like I was noticing my own triggers more. So like it's better, I think, to not think about it too much. You know, the caffeine thing is interesting. I mean, right now I'm in such a you know, weirdly lucky position where I'm not going to work every day. I can pretty much avoid my triggers as much as I want. But yeah, caffeine is something that I could definitely cut back on if I'm ever in a trigger-rich environment again. I think that, you know, I've done some psychedelics throughout my life, and I kind of feel like that's helped a little bit. You know, you don't have to talk about drugs if you don't want to, but I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that.
So I haven't done any psychedelics or anything, but I have a lot of friends who microdose. And, you know, there's like, you know, the technology behind like medicinal mushrooms and all that kind of stuff. There's so much changing, you know, all these new studies are coming out where it's like, it can alleviate depression and anxiety and all this kind of stuff if you do the right dosage and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, it gets tricky at a certain point because you're like, what if I do it too much the one day and then I do something stupid to myself? So I tried as much as I can to figure out in my own way how to deal with it. And not for the sake of like denying any of that stuff. Like I'm sure like, you know, there's this perfect mixture of everything that works well. But for me, it was just like, I know what to get into. And for me, like if I'm not making eye contact or looking at a person while they're eating, like whether it's rude or not, like there's no etiquette to eating and looking at a person. That doesn't matter. So like, I'll just like, I look at my food or I look at the TV or I look at whatever. And then this is strange for me because I have barely left the house during all this stuff. So I feel like I think I'm a lot better, but I really just haven't been around a lot of people.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's kind of a tricky thing too, where like I'm worried that when I go back into the world and like there's big groups of people again, you know, I start picking up on all that stuff. But like kind of getting back to the whole thing where I feel like you have to be careful because if you're treating the wrong thing, it's not going to do anything, and then you're going to have, different symptoms that you already had.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and I don't mean just psychedelics, but I mean like anything you put into your body, there's a result of everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I've never been medicated for it because nobody knows what to what to give you, I guess. So I can't really say if I've tried anything. But yeah, just purely circumstantial evidence, I've noticed that my symptoms seem to be better after the day after a mushroom trip, or I haven't really tried microdosing, but I'd like to try that. I'm curious, I jotted down, I rarely make notes, but I was so excited to talk about misophonia finally that I actually made notes this time. Do you have any thoughts on ASMR? Are you familiar with this? Because I think it's the devil, but I know some people really, really love it. It's like the anti-misophonia.
So a weird, very personal thing is, well, first I'll say I don't listen to it or really pay attention much,
Mm-hmm.
But I totally get it. So the evil side of my hearing is I always call it the spidey sense without any of the good stuff that comes with it. You just pick up everything and that's it. But there is this this certain positive trigger for certain sounds, I guess. Like a very it's some weird pleasure center or something going on, and I think it has to do with just a super mega heightened sense of hearing.
Yeah,
I think that there has to be something with that. I don't know. So I totally get why people watch that stuff, but there's one where someone was opening a bag of chips and eating, and I'm I literally hate this so much.
Yeah.
This is the worst thing for me. But I totally understand why for someone else that's an appetizing thing, I guess.
Yeah, or watching girls whisper, or just anything like that. That's literally my hell.
but the weird thing is for me, sometimes the whispering thing is really nice,
Yeah.
But then the second there's one off thing, I'm hell no. Because even as you're doing it right now, there's certain podcasts where I will listen to the mixing of it or the editing or just the way someone speaks, and without saying the name of it. There's a writing one I listened to, and one of the guys has a really nice voice, and he has this cool throatiness to it, and the other guy talks like this and blah blah. And whenever it gets to the other guy, all I can do is just concentrate. Where I'm I want to look at your mouth while you're speaking and just know what's going on. And I can't turn off those thoughts where I'm your inflection is so strange, and it's completely distracting for me. So that's another one too. I imagine you're the same way, where you pay attention to voices and are hypercritical to them.
Guys, I want to tell you about a really cool Kickstarter project with just a couple of days left as of the Monday release of this episode. It's for a children's book called The Yell of Teddy Drake by Sam DeLaury and Vivian Franklin. And this is a really cool book, and I will tell you why. So it's kind of like a retelling of The Ugly Duckling. It follows Teddy, who is a very cute little baby swan. And Teddy is from a non-traditional family. Teddy is a foster kid. He's got 2 sets of parents to deal with, and he loves them both, but sometimes it's a lot. And he's just a little guy. He's a little baby swan. It's hard to deal with his emotions, and that's why this book is really important, because there's lots of kids out there in open adoptions, blended families, foster care, and they're not represented very well in children's literature. So it's a really beautiful book. The illustrations are lovely and adorable, and it's written in this very satisfying rhyme scheme, and it's even the typeface is inclusive too. It's written or printed in the typeface Open Dyslexic, which is a typeface designed against some common symptoms of dyslexia. So it's just a really cool project, and they are at about 63% of their backing as of this read. So get in there and help them get all the way. There's some really cool rewards for some of the pledges. At $12 or more, you can let them know an organization, a school, a library, a child care center that you want to have a copy of this book, and Sam, the author, will send it to them, or schools, daycares, libraries. There is a Spanish language version. You can buy a book for a child in foster care. You can get the first edition hardcover in English or Spanish, limited edition signed books, all kinds of rewards. But basically, the main reward is just helping this book get out into the world. And again, it is such a beautiful story told in a really sweet and funny and relatable way for, kids of all ages can understand it. And, I think it's wonderful for both children who are in those non-cookie cutter families and also kids who are, to understand that there's all kinds of situations out there. And it's always good to have some tools for managing how you feel about stuff. So that's The Yell of Teddy Drake on Kickstarter. I will link to it in the episode description so you can find it easily and help it get all the way. Do you this is another, all of my friends who listen to this episode are going to be like, oh, MK is crazier than we thought. But do you ever imitate them? The voices that really get to you? Do you ever try to figure out why they sound like that? If you're I don't know, I know how crazy this sounds, but it is a thing.
Also, yes, before you even finish, but keep going.
It is a thing that I found out is a real thing called echolalia, which is common among misophonia sufferers, which...
no shit.
Yeah.
So that... Okay, because I already do this, but yeah, keep going.
No, good. So you do it too, it's not just me?
Yeah. Where you just repeat a strange sound you heard or something?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Holy shit. You say it, what's it called? Echo what?
Echolalia.
Okay.
Yeah, this was one of the things I found out after I learned that there was a name for it, and I started digging into it, and yeah, that was one of the things that came up, and I was like, oh my God, I do that. I would be sitting there in, not in the classes, but after the classes that I had with the teachers who clicked their K's and C's in a certain way. I would just replicate it, not because I want to or because I like it, but because it's I'm trying to figure out, it's almost if I can analyze it to the point where I understand it, maybe it won't bother me anymore. But of course, that's not how it works.
So I do that with accents. I don't know if it's just me trying to figure out how they say it, but there's certain things that are pleasing or certain things that are annoying, and I notice myself echoing it.
Yeah.
So that's wild.
Yeah, super weird. And I don't think of myself as having exceptionally good hearing, but I guess I do have a really strong ear. I'm a casual musician, but I've always been a really natural, I can harmonize really naturally. I have a really good ear for melody. I can just remember something. And same for languages and accents. I can, even if I don't know a language, I can imitate the accent pretty well after I've heard it a few times. I can say the few phrases I know in, French or Japanese or whatever in a very convincing French or Japanese dialect. But
yeah.
So maybe that is related. Maybe having a good ear, it's not necessarily that my sense of hearing is better, but I'm attuned to the way things sound.
Yeah, and I feel judging just based on you being a radio personality, there's a level of how am I trying to say this? This creativity that's there, so you kind of just notice more things about the world.
Yeah.
So on my end, a musician and writer, I'm always just paying attention to everything, but doesn't mean it's a good thing every time I'm paying attention to it. So I'm just very hyper in tune, and I can't turn it off.
Yeah, man. So I'm surprised. So you were in your 20s when yours first came out. Is that right?
I think so, or at least that when I was younger, there are some family members that had some chewing stuff going on, mm-hmm. and I just remember trying to get away from it all the time.
Yeah.
But I didn't think anything of it. I thought I was just I really don't like people who chew with their mouth open.
Right.
And that was it for me.
Okay. So it was a thing even then, because I feel childhood or adolescence is where these things usually manifest. It's I don't know. I'm talking out of my ass, really. I'm not a therapist or anything.
But what's odd though is the physical part of humans, you can develop an allergy when you're 35. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's all of these things can unfortunately manifest at any time. There's no it's not like PTSD where there's this defining moment and then everything else is reactionary to that. It's just your brain wants to do it now, and then you're shit.
Yeah.
So I feel like the more I knew about it, the more I paid attention to those things. And like, yeah, it's one of those things. And I don't know, this is an interesting thing that I've been talking about with more people. Movie theaters are a really hard one for me.
Yeah, same.
And it's all the popcorn. Like, I enjoy the taste of popcorn. I love being in a movie theater. I love the surround sound, but humans make it one of the hardest experiences for me in the world.
Yeah.
So I would like go to movies, and like especially with my fiance and stuff, and I would hear people chewing, and it was like not like I'm chewing. It was like open mouth, like projectile shooting the popcorn sound chewing.
It's like they can't help themselves. Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah, and like that's the point of popcorn, to make the pop sound. But like I despise that so much. And it was to the point where the only way I could cope was grabbing my leg and pinching it as hard as I could, like literally digging my nails into my leg so I felt enough pain to ignore the sounds enough to focus on the movie.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is like near self-abuse to just for this. Like, I really want to see this Marvel movie, but this group of people, I don't like the way they sound. Like, that's not a normal feeling. So like every time I'd be like, hey, you want to go see this movie? And then Ashley, my fiance, would be like, yeah, I don't know. And I didn't really know what she meant by that. Like, I'm like, oh, she just doesn't really like going to movies. And then she took me to a matinee, and Birds of Prey, I think, may have been the last one I saw in theaters. And I remember like loving it. And I was like, I think half of this is because there weren't any people in the theater. Like, I got all of the parts I liked without the distractions of humans, you know?
Totally. Yeah, I'm right there with you on all of that. I've also done the pain coping mechanism, especially in school. You know, when it was really inescapable, I'd be like digging my nails into my arm, trying to just like focus on that. Movie theaters, my strategy is I'm a back row sitter. I will go straight for the back row if my friends will let me, or the farthest back that I can be without anybody being behind me, because I find the sounds easier to cope with if they're coming from in front of me than behind me.
Yeah. I think there's like a control thing to that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's partially like being able to see where it's coming from so I can identify it. Yeah. I don't know. But it does suck because I also love movies. But yeah, my thing, I guess, is I just wait until things have been out for a long time and then just go when nobody's going anymore.
Yeah. And like for me, it sucks because I'm so like in tune with like pop culture stuff. I get like, I hate spoilers, and I've pretty much built myself into this like double-edged sword where it's like, I love this stuff, but also it's the thing that like brings me so much pain, I guess, essentially. So when obviously COVID hit, movie theaters stopped doing stuff, or at least for the most part. And, you know, all the like VOD, like the video on demand stuff has been happening. And I remember being like, $20 for a movie? Are you kidding me? And then I thought about it and I'm like, no, that's still less for two people to watch a movie in an actual theater. And then you also have your drinks and your food and everything that you're in control of. So like me personally, I'm like, oh no, I love this. And like I miss being in a theater and like a bunch of people walking out together and that cool, like unexplainable, like nostalgic feeling. But like, man, I will gladly just like sit in my room or sit in my living room and watch something and know I paid $20 for it. Because like I'll pay $20 for like a graphic novel or something like that, but I won't do it for a movie, you know? Like,
yeah, no, I've spent $20 on dumber things than that. I will absolutely, you know, if there was a new release I really wanted to see, because like you said, you know, for two people, or if you bring a friend over, three people, you're watching it, that's way cheaper than movie tickets. And yeah, it's pretty reasonable. But I love the movie theater experience. I love especially, you know, when you see like something new and exciting, like a big blockbuster, and everybody's like really into it and like clapping and cheering and, you know, booing at all and nobody really boos, I guess, but like, you know, having that like collective movie theater experience. Yeah. Back when that used to be good.
Yeah. And like for me, like that's the part I miss. Like when I saw like the last Avengers movie, like people were like standing up and cheering in certain parts, and I was like, I am so amped right now. This is the best, because like so much was happening that it wasn't like a quiet movie, there's a bunch of stuff going on.
Yeah.
So for me, it's a lot of like distraction, I guess, too, where if I'm writing, I love to like be in my office and have music going on. But if I hear like a weird bird or like my cat scratching or something going on, I throw on headphones, and then I'm like, I'm in control. Like I know what I'm going to hear. Even my own typing, like I have a loud keyboard and I try to not like focus on that. So there's certain things like that I'm like learning how to control. And then with music, a lot of people ask me, how do you be in a band if you have misophonia? But for me, it's different because if I'm the one making the music, and I normally wear hearing protection anyway, like I always have earplugs or an in-ear monitor or something, like I know exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But the difference is if I go to a show and let's say I forget earplugs or something like that, I noticeably start getting more angry because if something is just, and that's another thing too, where like if something is too loud, my reaction is angry. And it's not even, I don't know if that's a misophonia trigger at all. I think it's just like, I know this is unhealthy and it's driving me crazy that they're that inconsiderate.
Yeah, I get that. I have more of like an anxious reaction to like being at a show that's too loud and, having forgotten my earplugs, just more like, oh God, I have to protect my ears and get out of here. But yeah, it kind of sounds related if you have like the anger reaction.
Yeah, and like, I remember I went to go see the band Failure, which is like one of my favorite bands. And the band before them, Swerve Driver, super rad, had no idea they're playing for an hour. So I was like the show didn't have that many people, so I was like near the front. And what I didn't know is they're one of the loudest bands ever. So like I'm watching them and it was like so loud that I was like kind of getting like lulled. Like I was like kind of getting like sleepy. And then I started getting really angry.
Oh,
and then I was like, I think this is bad. So I like bought earplugs for like $2, like 2 individual earplugs. I'm like, I don't even care. I need this.
You got it.
And I came back. The rest of their set was fine. And then Failure, the band after them, like the vocalist is a sound engineer. So he's mixed like Nine Inch Nails albums and Paramore and like all this other wild stuff. So they play at a super reasonable volume and you don't even need earplugs and it's like perfectly mixed. But I had that like experience before. It was like burning my tongue on hot coffee when I was trying to get the taste for it like 5 minutes later,
Yeah.
So yeah, I've had like varying degrees of like music versions dealing with misophonia. The worst though for me was I worked at Guitar Center in the drum section. And part of the appeal of going to the drum section in Guitar Center is you just get to play whatever you want. So I would lose my mind because people would come in there and just bash for like way too long.
Yeah.
So their thing was, well, just wear earplugs. And I'm like, but I have to take them out if I have to talk to a customer or yell over people. So I started making these rules that like very much don't exist in their policy, where I was like, yeah, and like just so you know, we have like the 20-second rule for drumming. And they're like, what? That's not a thing. And I'm like, yeah, like they just changed it recently. So I started like making up stuff so I could just, keep a shred of sanity from that. But yeah, that was I remember someone going, dude, why does the sound of people drumming piss you off? You're a drummer. And I'm like, because it's not me doing it.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're not in control of it. Because you don't know when they're going to stop.
Exactly.
So let me ask you, since you put the album out, have you had any other people like me coming out of the woodwork? Like, have you met other people with misophonia through this, or just in the course of your life?
I've had a few people that have like similar things, and then a lot of people saying, "I think I have that." And then they kind of like have the traits of, the people that give me triggers or whatever. But yeah, like not really, I feel like you're the first person that I've had like a full like conversation with about, and then other than like the people that were heading those associations, like talking to them about all of it. But yeah, not that many, surprisingly.
Yeah. And
like, I just thought of something too. I was on a Google Hangout with my friends. Like we have this like private DM comic group. So we always jump on these big Google Hangouts and we're talking throughout the day. And once in a while, like someone will be like doing something while they're on it. So they'll be like opening a bag of chips and eating it, but like their mic isn't muted.
Oh God.
And I'm the only one that gets affected by it. And I like my reaction to sounds, I always have to ask what it is so I can understand it first.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not trying to be mean, but it just snaps out. Like I always be like, what is that? What's that sound? And then it's almost to the point where everyone already knows what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
So I'll try. So like I thought someone had like a hole punch the other day, and I was like, is someone like cutting things with scissors or a hole punch or something? And then it was one of my friends off screen. He had a fidget spinner, which I imagine he has anxiety or something. So he's also dealing with a separate thing. And then I got pissed off about it for my thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, so I guess I kept asking, I'm like, what is that sound? Like, it's driving me crazy. And then I like texted him later and we're super fine about it. But like, it's one of those things where I have this thing pisses me off. I blurt out and like see red and say something when I don't mean to, or I'll stare at someone or do it. Like I actually can't control those feelings, which sucks.
Yeah.
And then I apologize for it. And then I feel like remorse and guilt. So it's like this like cycle of shit that happens all the time.
I know, it sucks because like I'm acutely aware that like everybody is dealing with their own thing, and even if it's not this, it could be something else. Like you said, your friend with the fidget spinner, like, you know, could be using that for his anxiety, and like it's not his fault that like it happens to trigger your thing. So like, yeah, I always want to be considerate of everybody else, and like, you know, I don't like to ask people to make allowances for me ever is also a big thing for me. It's like I really hate to be like to like rock the boat or like ask for special treatment in any way, but like you gotta sometimes or you'll go crazy. And I think, you know, like my friends have been really great about it since I started kind of like letting them in on the fact that like maybe if you're in the car with me, if you could not chew gum, that would be really cool, guys. And you know, everybody's like very chill about it, even if they don't necessarily understand it. Like they do respect it, and that's like all I can ask.
Yeah, and like what sucks is because a lot of it is like control oriented.
Mm-hmm.
When people think you're just being rude and a control freak, like it's like wanting control, but there's stakes to it. I guess that's a good way of putting it. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like I don't want it because I'm selfish. I want it because like I'll have a very bad time if I don't have these certain things a certain way.
Yeah, it will ruin my day. Like that's what I tell people. I'm like, I know this sounds petty and I know it's annoying and you want to chew gum, but like it will ruin my day. So like just please, please just do this for me.
It's also oddly comforting hearing like about your specific trigger, because like I feel like the few people I have talked to that have it each have a totally different one.
Yeah.
So like mine is like the sound of chips and like nail biting. Those
Yeah.
are like my two big ones. And then I forgot, one of my friends has a whistling one. I don't know if that gets you at all.
Whistling
But-
doesn't really, chips do get me. Anything like food, you know, or like mouth sounds is pretty bad for me. But like whistling, unless it's like going on for a really long time, isn't too bad for me. And like chips are annoying, but don't get to me the way that gum does usually, unless again, somebody is like sitting next to me, open mouth chewing chips for a long time.
Yeah.
What's the other one? Like rhythmic things, like repetitive, like rhythmic sounds that I can't get rid of. Like if I'm in bed and like sometimes like, I don't know, like your fan chain will like knock against the fan in a certain like rhythmic way. And like, it's almost different from the regular reaction. It's not really that anger. It's more like I just hyper focus in on it and cannot get past it. Like I'm a big fan of like white noise when I sleep. It really helps.
Yeah, I sleep with a fan, and then if it's not like it's not the summer, I don't have like a literal fan in there, but we have our bathroom fan like on at all times, and it's just for the white noise.
Yeah.
A thing that I like never really put together until right now too. So I started touring when I was like technically like 16 is when I was like leaving the state and doing shows and stuff. And I feel like, or 15, I don't know, but a lot of the time there's always one or two people in the band where you're sleeping in some stranger's house and you're all in a room together, and it's not like we didn't ever get hotels. We weren't one of those like luxurious bands.
Mm-hmm.
We were like, we sleep wherever we can to save as much money so we could afford Taco Bell and then get home and not have, you know, not be broke.
Mm-hmm.
We just, you know, we'd always like maybe be even or lose a little bit.
Yeah.
So there's always someone in the band that snored, and it wasn't like a little snore. It was like an earth shattering death snore
Oh,
every
God.
single time.
Yeah.
and they usually were a bass player for some reason. uh, like, you know, that like low rumble, they really love it. So I had to learn how to listen to music to fall asleep for the first time in my life. And I would blare, at the time, my iPod. It's hard to say iPod now because I want to say iPad.
Sounds so wrong, I know.
Yeah. And then like later, like just, I would have to like sleep with my phone and have earbuds in, and I would turn my phone on like very loud. So at first it was certain songs, like acoustic albums. And then it was like, I had white noise or like random sound effect things. And then I've changed it over the years, but I always wonder if like I like fried my hearing or something, because it's like the same as being on an airplane. Like it's really loud. You don't realize it.
Yeah, that's a concern of mine for sure. With like, I try not to sleep with earbuds in, and it's also like a big source of anxiety if I'm like traveling in a group. It's like, is anybody gonna snore tonight? Because I absolutely cannot sleep through snoring. And I'm lucky. My boyfriend actually is a bass player, and he does snore sometimes, but he's like pretty sensitive to like, you know, if he's asleep and snoring, if I just give him like a gentle nudge, usually he'll like change positions and it's not too much of a problem. But like we went to a wedding last year or the year before or something that was at like, it was really cool. It was at this summer camp and we were sharing a cabin with a bunch of other people. And of course, everybody got super drunk. And, you know, a couple people in our cabin were snoring, but one person was just the loudest I have ever heard. And I'm just lying there on this cot in this summer camp cabin, just wide awake, miserable, nothing I can do. I'm like, I guess I'm just not sleeping because this person's not going to stop. And, you know, they're not the person who loves me, so I can't go over and nudge them and ask them to roll over.
Yeah, that's such a weird one too, because I remember like back in the day, I would do that and then people would go, what? Or like, oh yeah, sorry, I'll try not to. And I'm like, you physically can't just stop snoring. Like that's not a thing.
Yeah, you can't try not to.
so there's this like, you know, I have like a renewed sense of powerlessness where it's like I let the world do what it should, without, you know, trying to interact with every single part of it. So like with that, for example, I was like, okay, well, I could be polite and just listen to music, and I learned how to do that. And then at home, I sleep with a fan. And like, if I'm writing something, I need to have music so I kind of create my like headspace to focus on it too. So there's a lot of different things that fall in it, you know. And unfortunately, like a lot of it is like the stuff I do for a living. So like playing music, you know, you're constantly in close proximity to people that eat the way you don't want them to, and they snore the way you don't want them to, and they do all these other potentially triggering things to someone with misophonia. With writing, it's a big distracting thing for me. So if I'm, you know, when coffee shops are a thing you could go to write or work during the day, I would go to places and then I would hear people talking in the background, and it would just drive me crazy because I wasn't in control of the soundtrack to block it out. So I feel like being home a lot and learning to appreciate like working remotely in my own office at home, like I've gotten so much more work done. I've like written a ton of comics. I have technically 2 new jobs, and I'm just like constantly going nuts, writing stuff, promoting stuff, and then doing all the passion project stuff around that. So I'm very busy and distracted, which has been great. And I genuinely think I've like unlocked something in my brain to where I'm able to do that and keep that momentum going. So even when like the world gets back to being the world, like I think I know, oh, I could walk in a different room and do that. I don't have to go somewhere to do that.
Yeah.
And the rest of the world is going to start following suit with that.
Yeah. I think hopefully, you know, when things start to get back to some kind of normal, whatever that looks like, I would love to see a change in that whole culture of like, you have to be at your physical office from 9 to 5, from 10 to 6. You know, that would drive me nuts when I was at the radio station because I was there full time. I was the music director. And so much of what I was doing in the morning from my desk, I could just as easily have done, on a walk with my dogs, because I was just like taking phone calls, or I could have just like, sat and drank a coffee in my living room and answered emails, but there's this culture of like, no, you have to show face at the office. You have to be there for a certain amount of hours. Otherwise, we don't know if you're worth the $30,000 we're paying you. So
yep. And it's all accountability stuff on their part. Like they literally want to just go, are you worth it?
Yeah,
Prove it.
Exactly. And yeah, you know
Can
what?
you type emails near me? Like, sure.
God, and I was so lucky because this is actually really funny. I should let you go soon, but this just like, that just reminded me. So I was lucky in that at my office job, I shared an office with one other person who I got along with very well, who did not make any weird sounds. So that was great. But right before my position was eliminated, we were getting ready to move, and they were going to move to an open office plan in the new building. And like, I had very vocally, like when they said we were moving and like told us what the new building was like, I was like, listen, I would just like to say that I don't want an open office plan. I find it really hard to work in that environment. It's really distracting. Of course, everything but saying, hey, I'm crazy and I have misophonia and I can't do it. But then of course they went ahead anyway and were like, oh, we're going to do open office. It'll be great. So I really feel like I dodged a bullet, because I don't even know if I would have, been able to keep working there in an open office setting.
Yeah, it's so odd. Like, because the funny thing too is I remember reading like in Business Digest or some, miscellaneous business thing. They're just like, oh yeah, open offices, they're dead. They don't work.
Yeah.
Everyone like undid it. So yeah, that whole thing is super funny because people are just constantly trying to get synergy and, do all of the like generic business lingo stuff, which I'm super against, but I think it's funny because I like, work in conjunction with people in that space, as they call it. But like when I was working at like coffee shops and stuff like that too, everyone was so worried about like the flow and all this kind of stuff. But all I would do is dream about having a cubicle where I'm away from everyone and I could be in my own little corner and like focus and do stuff.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, I guess that's what my office is. I literally own a cubicle, just part of a house.
Yeah, no, totally. I'm lucky. My house is really small, but there was just enough space for me to squeeze in a little recording studio in my closet. And yeah, I've got my little private nook. I'm very happy here.
And a lot of it too, you take for granted, like there's so many like cosmetic things, and then you start realizing like, no, the practicality of recording in a closet, because it's actually better for the audio.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a separate space. And when I like, so for me, for example, like my office, just to like stimulate my brain, I painted it this green color. So, which now is hilarious for like Zoom calls and stuff, because it's a perfect green screen. but like initially, like I wanted to walk in this room and not feel like it was the rest of the house.
Yeah.
So I like can finally concentrate, and I like will light like a scented candle to like, I'm like, okay, I'm smelling this thing, I'm seeing this thing, I'm listening to music, and now I'm in work mode. So all of these senses combine to enter this new mode. But then when I leave this room, work is done. So I'm not like a slave to having to do work all the time,
Yeah.
So that's what I've been trying to train myself to do, and it's been working pretty well.
That's genius. Yeah. Well, Jono, this has been really, really fun. We are at about an hour, so I want to let you get back to your life. But once again, will you tell us about the Kickstarter and whatever else you got going on right now, where we can find your music?
Yeah, definitely. So The Inevitables is nearing its end on Kickstarter. It is a music and comic project. I wrote the comic with an awesome team of creators. It's coming out eventually, but it's really rad. And the story, like I didn't really touch on it earlier, it's just like a group of nobodies who, under extreme circumstances, they're thrown together and they have to save the world.
Oh, perfect.
So when you read it, you'll find out why and what's going on. But it's based in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and a lot of it deals with like the divide of a massive bridge dividing the haves and the have-nots.
Yeah.
So because
Very
I'm
timely.
based in Michigan. Yeah. And like in Flint, Michigan, like the city that I've lived near forever, you could literally see the line in the sand where it goes from like really nice apartment thing, and then you go one block over and then it's a bunch of homeless people.
Yeah.
And they haven't figured out a way to have people work together and live together. So I wanted to touch on that kind of stuff too. But again, it's all in the comic. Then my band No Trigger just recorded a ton of songs for an album that will eventually be coming out on a mystery label. We're going to be like sending it once it's completely finished to a bunch of people. And then I also am in a comic anthology called Maybe Someday. It's put out by a company called A Wave Blue World, which is one of my favorite names. And maybe someday you could order it at your local comic shop. You just go there and say, I want to order Maybe Someday. And then they go, cool, we'll do it.
Nice.
So, yeah. So I have a lot of comic stuff, a lot of music stuff, and I'm trying to have a lot of life stuff in between.
Well, thank you for this conversation. It was incredibly refreshing. I feel like, I don't know if you ever watched Arrested Development, but Tobias, when he's like, there's dozens of us.
Oh, I've posted that about Misophonia specifically.
It feels very apropos, but it feels really good to talk to somebody else who gets it. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad, we're not alone, the dozens of us.